My name is Satya Panigrahi and I currently work as a product manager at a startup called Well, and I'm based out of Mumbai. I've worked as a backend database engineer at companies, at large companies like Tech Mahindra, Agria Solutions, and Pelican AI, wherein my domain of work has ranged from handling the entire backend operations to working on a system-wide level applications as well. I graduated in 2016 as an electronics engineer from Mumbai University. Having worked as a developer allowed me to understand what a good engineering solution would be, but that didn't really give me enough perspective about how good or better products are built out while thinking about the engineering solutions that are currently present or available. So I wanted to explore the domain of understanding things from a user's perspective as well, which is essential for an engineer to have, but I did not have at that stage, and I really wanted to enter into a domain which allowed me to think about the problems more deeply from a user's perspective, while also thinking about the larger picture about how an organization or how a product should function inside an organization. Which is why I very deeply resonated with the field of product management, as it allowed you to express yourself under all of these domains that I'm describing. There's basically a chicken and an egg problem, wherein companies want candidates who have experience in the domain, and candidates are looking for a job which gives them their first experience. So breaking into a product management role essentially then becomes really hard for people who've already worked in a particular domain for a few years. And to add to this complexity, sometimes candidates with years of working experience also have to compete with fresh graduates from top MBA and engineering institutes, and this is the sort of place wherein normal candidates who are currently working can be at a slight disadvantage. I applied for at least 10 to 12 different product roles before joining Upraised, and the consistent feedback that I used to get was either I was not up to the skill level that was required, or I did not even understand what a product manager has to do. And that is essentially where I really started to feel like I need a particular program to give me a right sense of direction in terms of not just how to crack or appear for a particular interview, but to also understand what sort of expectations are there from an interviewer while they look at candidates. In the very first week, I realized how far the gap was in terms of where I was at that stage and where I really need to move forward. And that really felt daunting initially, but due to the support that the team at Upraised gave, especially Mona, Abhishek, and Aditya, the entire process then becomes a journey rather than a deep exploration of where you need to go. And that is where really it helped me out, as I still feel there's a lot to learn even while working as a product manager, but essentially understanding the expectations of what a product manager does and how does one think properly from a product perspective is something which really was driven home at Upraised, because before joining Upraised, all I thought about was how to do new cool stuff without actually thinking properly whether the cool stuff is actually required to be built out or not. There are three aspects of the learning journey which I personally found something that I needed to improve on. Number one was my thinking abilities. I mean, I assume myself to be a fairly good thinker, but at the same time, the entire mind operates in a very chaotic manner. So the number one thing that Upraised helped me identify was how to streamline my thought process and to identify or come up with a structure which really aligns or allows you to explore your thoughts in a much more simpler manner, and also allows you to think from a first principles perspective in that sense, which is also the second point that I was going to lead up to. Thinking from a first principle perspective is not something that any candidate has during the interview process, particularly candidates who are applying fresh for a product management role. But Upraised really drives home about breaking down problems into smaller problems, which is essentially the crux of what first principles thinking is. And thirdly, Upraised allowed me to get more confident about my own abilities, because the type of exposure that you get while at Upraised is really hardcore in terms of not having any strings attached to you. So you really have to push yourself to get things done, and that is essentially what product management is, that you have to constantly keep pushing yourself to get things done. To be brutally honest, working at big companies allows you the protective shield of either maybe coasting along or not having to think things very clearly when you're doing something. Whereas now, working at a very small, extremely impactful company, and especially in a product management role, you have to keep things in your mind and always be at the lookout of what would really make the maximum impact for your company while in a minimum amount of time. And there are essentially hard decisions that you have to make, and failures that you are obviously going to see, which is not really the case at large companies because things are played very safely over there. And that's essentially hard, like failing at your job and then realizing that this is the place that I failed. But there's also beauty to this whole process. As one of my colleagues or mentors once told me, that you essentially get paid to learn in tech. So this is the best job in the world.